Hi, it's Katrina. Number 11. Nidhogg. Nidhogg was a fierce dragon of Norse mythology who was intent on destroying peace and virtue. He ruled over criminals and was sometimes called the Malice Striker. This massive horned creature had bright scales and two powerful front legs equipped with ferocious claws. He had no back legs, but possessed a serpentine tail and bat-like wings, beneath which he carried the bodies of deceased criminals. Nidhogg lived near an ash tree called Yggdrasil, which supported the 9 realms of Norse mythology. He ate the tree's roots, and particularly favored the roots that belonged to the cold world, known as Niflheimr. Sometimes he visited the dark goddess of hell, who was rumored to be his master. Nidhogg's dark role was meant to balance out the good forces of Yggdrasil. He brought criminals to justice by delivering them to their final resting place along the dark shores of Nadastrand. Here they were banished to a terrifying hall where dragons ate their bodies. Nidhogg communicated with an eagle that sat at the top of Yggdrasil and who symbolized wisdom and virtue through a squirrel named Ratatoskr, who acted as a messenger between the two. Tensions between Nidhogg and the eagle eventually erupted into a series of frenzied attacks against one another, which ultimately destroyed Yggdrasil. When the chaos was over, the tree was bathed in well water that promoted regrowth, and everything healed again. Number 10. Akik. Also known as Akeku, Akik was a 4-legged dragon with a long serpentine body. He lived in the remote corners of Egypt, favoring the fringe deserts and wastelands outside the fertile Nile Valley. Some ancient Egyptian records associate Akik with the god Set or Seth, who represented the personification of darkness and evil. Travelers brought stories of Akik to Europe, where the dragon gained legendary status. It's even believed that Akik may have inspired stories about fierce, mythical bird-like creatures called griffins. There were different versions of Akik depending on the region. In Egypt, he had many of the typical characteristics that come to mind when most people think of dragons. But stories that circulated later on in Europe describe Akik as having an antelope's body, the head of a bird, and more serpentine than dragon-like features. Both Egyptian and European myths often depict the creature as having 3 upright cobras on its head. The 3 uraeus symbolize sovereignty and divine authority. Number 9. The Cockatrice. The bizarre beast known as the Cockatrice is a 2-legged dragon with a rooster's head. It had a centuries-long presence in English mythology, with its first known appearance in legends dating as far back as the 12th century. The Cockatrice was so powerful, it didn't need to physically attack its victims in order to kill them. Using a trait known as the death-darting eye of Cockatrice, it could take a life just by looking at them. It could also kill its enemy just by touching or breathing on them. For some reason, only weasels were immune to the cockatrice's death glare. A cockatrice was hatched from cock egg, or the egg of a male chicken, which was incubated by a toad or a snake. To avoid bringing one into existence, people were advised to toss rooster eggs over their family's home, so that they landed on the other side of the house without hitting it. The cockatrice had 2 major weaknesses. If it heard a rooster crow or saw its own reflection in the mirror, it died instantly. For anyone who knew, these were easy ways to defeat one. Number 8. Kur. In the Sumerian language, the word Kur was complex and had varied meanings. Some stories depict Kur as a mountain or a foreign land, and sometimes Kur is simply used as a name for the netherworld. There was also an underworld deity known as Kur, who originated in Mesopotamian and Sumerian mythology. He was a dark, gigantic, scaly dragon with massive wings who lived in the space between the Earth's crust and the sea. According to one legend, right after the world formed, Kur abducted a goddess named Ereshkigal and took her to the netherworld. The water god, Enki, avenged the kidnapping by traveling to the netherworld by boat and attacking Kur. Water overpowered Enki's boat on all sides as Kur hurled rocks at the vessel. Fortunately, Enki eventually managed to dominate and kill Kur. This story serves as the prologue to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which some scholars believe is an early version of the story of Noah's Ark. The oldest versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh date back to sometime between 1300 and 1000 BC. The story of Kur also corresponds roughly to a few other mythological dragons, including the Hebrew Leviathan and the Babylonian Tiamat. Number 7. Leviathan. The Leviathan is a primordial biblical sea serpent or sea dragon. It's mentioned in several scriptures throughout the Old Testament, including in the Book of Job, Psalms, the Book of Amos, and the Book of Isaiah. The creature is thought to be rooted in pre-biblical Mesopotamian mythology. Each religion views the Leviathan differently, and the creature even varies between scriptures. For example, according to Job 41, the Leviathan symbolizes God's power of creation. On the other hand, Isaiah 27:1 describes the creature as a gliding and coiling serpent and a monster of the sea who represents Israel's enemies. Generally speaking, the Leviathan is depicted as massive and demonic-looking, with multiple heads. In some descriptions, it has a cylindrical whale-like body. According to others, it's more dragon-like, with scales, razor-sharp teeth, ferocious claws, and the ability to breathe fire. The Leviathan was tough, but not undefeatable. In the book of Isaiah, Yahweh, or God, slays the creature with his sword and distributes its remains as food to Hebrew people living in the wilderness. The word Leviathan eventually became a non-religious generic term for sea monsters, as well as a word to describe extremely powerful things or people of any kind. Number 6. Typhon. Typhon was perhaps the mightiest and deadliest monster of Greek mythology. He was the son of Gaia, the personification of the earth, and one of the primordial Greek deities, and Tartarus, a dungeon that imprisoned and tortured the Titan gods. Gaia and Tartarus created Typhon in a last-ditch effort to repel the Olympian gods from defeating the Titans during a decade-long war. Gaia also wanted to punish the god Zeus for imprisoning her Titan children. Nicknamed the father of all monsters, Typhon never slept. He was the largest and most grotesque creature who ever lived. This gargantuan beast towered over the mountains, and his head brushed against the stars. Typhon had a human-like torso, but instead of legs, his bottom half was made of huge snake coils. His body was covered in feathers, and he had 100 heads sprouting from his shoulders. The gods were so terrified of Typhon they fled to Egypt and slipped into obscurity by hiding in the wild. And they feared him with good reason. Typhon had even defeated Zeus, the king of the gods, severing several muscles from his hands and feet. Zeus eventually got his muscles back and managed to trap Typhon beneath Mount Etna. Legend has it that he creates the steam and flames that spew from the volcano. Number 5. Fafnir. Fafnir was a dragon of Norse mythology who started out as a mere dwarf. He was the son of a dwarf king named Hreidmar, who had lost another son and demanded compensation for the loss from the god Odin. Odin compensated Hreidmar in gold. Because Fafnir was the strongest of Hreidmar's surviving children, he was chosen to guard the treasure. But Fafnir became greedy and decided he wanted the gold all to himself, so he killed his father in order to get his hands on it. To protect the treasure, Fafnir transformed into a dragon and wreaked havoc on anyone who went near him. He also kept others away from his fortune by breathing poison. Fafnir's brother, a blacksmith named Regin, became fed up with Fafnir's selfish ways. Regin asked his foster son, a young hero named Sigurd, to kill his brother. Once the deed was done, Regin asked Sigurd to cook the dragon's heart for him. As the heart cooked, Sigurd touched it with his thumb to see if it was done. He burned himself and put his thumb in his mouth in a desperate attempt for relief. Suddenly, Sigurd began to understand bird language. The birds warned him that Regin was planning to kill him. Sigurd instead killed Regin and ran off with the treasure. Number 4. Bakunawa. In Filipino mythology, Bakunawa was a monstrous snake-like dragon that caused lunar eclipses by periodically trying to swallow the moon. Some myths describe Bakunawa as a god, while others frame him as an enemy of the gods. The creature's history is long and complex, and varies based on different regions throughout the Philippines. According to one story, Bakunawa lived in the sea at a time when the world had 7 moons. He was so fascinated by their glow, he simply wasn't satisfied with admiring them from afar, so he rose up out of the water and ate them. To stop the world from becoming pitch dark, people went outside at night and banged pots and pans together, and they also played the drums, in hopes of scaring Bakunawa and getting him to spit up the moon. Mothers warned their children about the dangers of Bakunawa to get them to behave. One children's song even pleads with the ruthless reptile to have pity and return the moon to its rightful place in the sky. Bakunawa may sound evil, but he wasn't officially demonized until the Spaniards colonized the Philippines and started converting people to Christianity. The Spanish depicted Bakunawa as a version of Satan and claimed that he ate humans. European records of the beast date back to 1637, but the legends of Bakunawa have been around for much longer than that. Unfortunately, documented records of these stories are hard to come by, making it difficult to differentiate between the original versions of Bakunawa and the influence that the Spanish had in reshaping his character. There are similar stories of mood-eating dragons in other Asian countries, including China, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Number 3. The Ala. An Ala, also sometimes called a Hala, is a female demon of bad weather in Bulgarian, Macedonian, and Serbian folklore. The creature appears in various forms depending on the legend, including as a humanoid, a raven, a snake-like monster, and a dragon. Regardless of what form they take, Alas are so tall that their bodies connect heaven and earth, with their dark hair forming the clouds and hiding their faces. Their main purpose is to destroy crops by guiding hail and thunderclouds towards them. This usually happens during the first half of summer, when grain crops are ripe. A person who crosses paths with an Ala will often suffer severe damage to their mental and physical health. Alas are rather gluttonous, with a particular preference for eating children. In some stories, they even carry a spoon in one hand, scooping up anything in their path that they desire. They also sometimes try to devour the moon and the sun, causing eclipses. Legend has it that if an Ala ever succeeds at one of these attempts, the world will end. It's possible to get on an Ala's good side by approaching her with trust and respect. Gaining her favor can be extremely beneficial. While an Ala can cause enormous damage, she treats the people she likes very well and will make them rich and rescue them when they're in trouble. Number 2. Jormungander. Also known as the Midgard serpent, Jormungander is a dragon-like sea serpent of Norse mythology whose name translates to Great Beast. He lives in the sea surrounding Midgard, which is the old Germanic term for the earth. His body is so long, it encircles the entire planet. Jormungander was enemies with the thunder god Thor. 2 of their most memorable battles are described in a series of medieval Icelandic literary works called the Eddas. In one of these stories, Thor goes fishing for Jormungander, but his line is cut by a giant named Heimir, who fears that Thor's activities will bring on Ragnarok, a series of events that lead to the end of the world. According to Norse tradition, Ragnarok will happen when Jormungander releases his grip on the world by letting go of his tail and storming onto the land. Half the world will erupt into flames, while Jormungander sprays poison into the seas and skies on the other half of the globe. After that, he and Thor will engage in one final battle, during which they will ultimately slay one another. In this story, nobody wins. Number 1. Vritra. Vritra is a serpent or dragon of Hindu mythology who represents drought. He is a member of a class of divine beings called Asuras, who are portrayed as either evil or benevolent, depending on the particular belief system. Usually they're depicted as demons. Vedic mythology portrays Vritra as an evil and seemingly indestructible creature who is eventually defeated by the forces of good. According to the hymn Rig Veda, Vritra blocked rivers and held the world's waters captive throughout his 99 fortresses. Then the deity Indra was born, and he began preparing to battle Vritra. Indra received a thunderbolt from the artisan god Vashtri, and the god Vishnu made room for the battle by taking 3 large steps out of the way. Vritra initially had the upper hand and managed to break Indra's jaws. Indra retaliated by throwing his massive weight onto Vritra's fortresses and crushing them. He won the battle, earning himself the title of Vratrahan, which translates to Slayer of the Firstborn of Dragons. According to another story, found in the ancient Sanskrit epic Mahabharata, the artisan god Vashtri created Vritra to avenge Indra for killing his son. Vritra swallowed Indra, but his victory was short-lived. The other gods forced him to regurgitate the deity, and the two brokered a truce that banned Indra from attacking Vritra under certain circumstances. But Indra got around the agreement based on a technicality and killed Vritra at twilight, using foam from the ocean's waves. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite dragon? What other mythological creatures would you like to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!